Hello everyone, Matt from Model Minutes here and welcome back to the workbench for another unboxing. Today I'm taking a look at this, the MiG-23 in 144th scale from Academy. So join me as I take a look inside the box and see what this kit is like. So starting off on the outside here, we can see we've got an image of two MiG-23s in formation and that it tells us at the top left that it's accurately reproduced in 144th scale. It is apparently also easy to assemble. Down here on the bottom left, it does tell us that no glue and paint is included, which is quite typical of Academy kits. There is one aircraft model and no figures. And the actual product could be different from the thing shown on the box, which can happen with Academy kits. I've seen it before where the paint scheme or even the kit indicated on the box isn't actually what you get inside. You can see that I do have a price sticker, but I'll talk about prices shortly, and scale is down here on the bottom right. Onto the thin edge, we do have an image of an assembled kit, and I think this is a fairly accurate representation of what is actually inside of the box, and it does look a little bit weird, doesn't it? I bet this is the case with some of these 144th scale kits. And then on this side we do have some more information in different languages, and we can see we've got an importer's sticker here from Bachmann, as they are the distributor. On this edge here we do have a little bit of extra information, which is a product code of 12614, and that's the same on the other side. Rear of the box doesn't feature anything, so let's open it up and see what we have. We do have, as usual, some extra paperwork, which is pretty standard in Academy kits, but I'm not going to look at that because I've focused on it before. What I am going to do is get straight into the instructions and see what these are like. So the instructions then are printed in black and white, which is not my favorite because when you look at the painting instructions, which are here, it could be a little bit confusing depending on what color you want to paint things. Fortunately, they have given us color callouts, so if we flip over to the other side, we can see our color callouts down here at the bottom, and it has also suggested different brands such as Mr. Color, Life Color, Humbrol, and Testers. So you can see that I think overall it's probably going to be quite similar to how it is on the box. We're going to have like a sky blue on the lower side, and then a variety of greens, browns, and sort of sand colors on the top surfaces. Only one paint scheme appears to be included. Well, I don't think it will be too complicated to do. Probably a bit of a simple project, and you could probably just brush paint all of this, which is what I might consider doing. If we flip over to the other side, then we have different symbols at the top, which is our key to what we might have to do during our build, and then we come on to the assembly. Perhaps the assembly instructions look a little cluttered. We start off with assembling our cockpit. There is no cockpit detail, so we just paint it black by the looks of it. What's number 5? Oh no, interior blue, my bad. Russian aircraft were more of a blue color internally. There is a canopy part here, and we have a nose cone as well. No indication of including any weight by the looks of it. So I probably would include weight inside of this part here just to prevent it from sitting on its tail, because it could do that. If we come on to this step here, you can see that we're now adding basically everything together. It appears that the wings have a swivel mechanism. This aircraft did have like swing wing capability, so that looks like it's got almost like a cog system which allows them to pivot if we don't glue them in. And then we add our different tail surfaces and things. Oh, and there's an engine exhaust too. Coming on to this step here, we have our wheels, which get built up in a number of different parts, which looks fairly intuitive, and then they get installed into the relevant holes on the bottom of the aircraft. After this, we have the last part of our tail surface, although I actually think that perhaps the MiG-23 had this tail surface that pivoted because it runs the risk of tail striking when the wheels are deployed. So I think that actually pivoted to the side when the wheels were deployed and then went vertical when the landing gear was raised. So I'm not sure what the accuracy there is. If you know more, do let me know in the comments. And then you can see we have a variety of underwing stores such as bombs and missiles, which can be included. However, I probably would mention that if the aircraft wings are free to pivot, these will sort of point in, because you can see we've got 2 mounting points here, which means that these will be positioned correctly for when the wings are swung in one position, but as you swing the wings, they'll either point out or point in depending on how they've designed it. So that's something just to be aware of. But yeah, maybe the instructions are a little bit cluttered, but I think for the most part they are fairly suitable, but I would prefer that they were printed in color. Moving on to the decals then, we have one small sheet of decals, which is quite typical. We have a copyright date of 1999, but do take that with a pinch of salt because copyright dates are not necessarily tooling dates. The decals seem to be to the kind of normal quality. The printing is not amazing. There is some slight registration issues where the colours don't quite line up, but it is fairly simple. However, I hope the light is catching it. It does show that the decal film around the outside of the decals is quite excessive. There is quite a bit of it, so I would just be aware of that. Academy decals are a little bit inconsistent. I've had some which have been really thin and gone onto the model really nicely, and others which have been really thick. These look like they might be the thinner kind, which I'm hoping will apply to the model quite nicely. With that then, it brings us onto the bag of bits, and you can see I've not actually had this one open, so let's change that right now. And I think the first thing to note is that the clear parts are loose in this bag. And there is always a bit of a risk when clear parts are in the bag with the sprues because they could get damaged. Fortunately, they were facing outwards, but there is always a risk that there could be some sort of issue with that. So the clear part then, you only get the one for the cockpit canopy. No detail on there, no framework. So any framework, and it looks like there is a little bit of framework on the canopy, would have to be kind of painted by yourself or masked if you're airbrushing. Perhaps the canopy is a little bit low. It does look a little bit more sort of higher on the actual artwork here. So perhaps not particularly accurate, little more than a molded shape, but there's no flash and the plastic looks relatively clear. So that's a positive. We do have two little sprues molded in a sort of greeny grey kind of plastic, and actually the detail level is not bad. We have recessed panel lines that you can see on there, which is quite typical of these kind of kits that you get from Academy. There's not much in the way of flash either, perhaps a few little bits in a few places, but not that much. Relatively crisp moulding, perhaps a few little scuffs and things on the surface, and a little mould seam down some of the parts, particularly on the wheels there. But for the most part, this is moulded quite nicely. Plastic is reasonably dense, but doesn't feel particularly greasy. And yeah, you can see we've got this sort of key system here for our swing wings, but the mounting points for your bombs means that you're pretty much going to have them set in one position. On this side then, same kind of deal. Ejector pin marks are on this side, but they don't really appear to be on visible surfaces, which is good. So hopefully they won't be visible or require any work to clean up. Again, a bit of a mould seam, especially down the bombs here, where the moulds join together. A little bit of work probably just to tidy that up. On the other sprue, we have our fuselage components and our nose. And you can see, again, it's the same kind of deal. Details are recessed. They're a little bit shallow, but I think they would catch a wash to make them a little bit more realistic. Yeah, generally, for the most part, this doesn't look to be moulded too badly. However, one thing I have noticed is there's no like landing gear covers. So there was no raised landing gear option. So I think having the wheels down is pretty much the only option you're going to have, unless you're willing to create landing gear covers for the bays, because there doesn't appear to be any landing gear covers. I will just check the instructions to make sure I didn't miss anything on that, but it doesn't look like there was any. So typically around here you would be going, yep, there needs to be covers. There doesn't appear to be any covers. So that's a little bit frustrating. If you wanted to have this in a raised option, you would have to cover those landing gear bays yourselves. But yeah, doesn't look too bad, especially when we know we saw a 1999 copyright date on there. Perhaps it's not particularly accurate, but I think for something quick and easy to do, sweet and simple, this shouldn't be too bad of a project. So let's wrap up. We had two grey-green kind of sprues molded to a reasonable quality. Perhaps it's not the most accurate representation of the MiG-23, but for the cheap price that you pay for it, it's something to do of an afternoon. Clear parts do leave a little bit to be desired. Whilst they're molded quite nicely, there's no detail on there, which will make masking them a little bit harder, and you're going to be relying on the tape to effectively create your panels or framework. Decals, one small sheet. They are printed to a reasonable quality, but there are some slight registration issues, and the inconsistency of Academy transfers makes me hope that they go onto the model okay. Painting instructions could be printed in colour for a bit more clarity to make it more obvious what you should be doing. Given that there are loads of different shades of grey here, it could be a little bit misleading and lead to making errors. And whilst the instructions here are reasonably easy to follow, I think maybe they are a little bit cluttered. But, you know, it's a cheap and simple kit. What more can we expect? And all of that came contained within this box, which I don't think is illustrated too badly. And you do have an example of the actual kit. I'm pretty sure that's the kit that we've seen inside of the box, which is fairly accurate representation. We did see a copyright date on this of 1999, but it is my understanding that this is actually a hobbycraft tooling from the 1980s. Whereabouts in the 1980s it doesn't specifically indicate, but it would appear that after the 80s, in the late 90s, Academy got their hands on this particular kit and have effectively been reboxing it ever since. The version I have here has been in production since 2013, and this was a relatively recent purchase as well, so it just goes to show that this is still in production today. A little bit of transparency with the tooling dates would have been fantastic to see that on the box, although the copyright date does indicate 1999, which means that this is going to manage your expectations a little bit. It's not like it has a copyright date of 2024 and then you open it and realize it's an old tooling. Price wise then, you can see on the box that I paid £3.75 for mine, which is like cheaper than a cup of coffee in most takeaway coffee shops. And from what I can tell online, the recommended retail price for this is £4.99, so I got this slightly under RRP, which makes it even better value. I would say that if you're going to be handing over more than a £5 for this, definitely shop around, because it's not necessarily worth that. But for the price that I paid, it's an absolute bargain, especially for something to do on a rainy afternoon when there's nothing on the telly and you can't be bothered to go outside. And with that, I'm going to leave this one here. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of my unboxing review and if my assessment of this kit was fair. Don't forget that we do have a Model Minutes Model Club, and if you'd like to join the club and get exclusive access to early videos and other perks, check out the links in the description. Massive thanks to these Model Club members for the extra support they give the channel, allowing me to create consistent content. Of course, there are other ways to help support the channel, and again, full information is below the video, but the best way to support the channel for free is by subscribing with notifications turned on so you never miss a modelling upload. Finally though, last thing to say is a massive thank you to you for watching this one, and I'll see you on the workbench again next time.